I have a few questions.
Yes, sir.
With premises, supporting premises. Now you have mentioned, Council, that FPIC under the IPRA law is sanctioned with the Constitution, and therefore, as laid down by the IPRA law, it must be implemented faithfully. However, may I ask, don't you consider the requirement of FPIC a seclusion program, meaning it secludes our brothers in the IP communities from the rest of us who occupies or who composes the majority in this country? If we are really that concerned to them, we must not place a program that secludes them from the rest of us.
Law, rather, it promotes the rights of the indigenous members of the cultural communities. Why does it promote their rights? They are given a land that they can develop, utilize, and protect. Therefore, studies have shown that these people are very marginalized. Hence, social justice dictates that we should give more to those who do not have. And this is one way of saying that IPs must be given more in line by allocating public forests there, which in their right they should have through their the ownership of their ancestors.
I also, thank you for that, Council. You also mentioned, Council, you cited a jurisprudence way back in 1909,
Yes.
telling us that ancestral domains, if validly claimed and proven, are private lands, meaning they can exploit them to the exclusion of other persons. However, like regular lands classified as A and D, untitled lands, it is necessary for the owner to confirm his title first before the courts of law or before the deed by an administrative matter to formalize his ownership, and as a proof thereof, a title is issued. Don't you feel that there must be the same process that must be completed before our IP brothers can claim exclusive ownership over these affected areas?
As A and Ds are not pecuniary instruments, hence they are not covered by the ancestral domain. Only forest lands or forest timberlands are covered under the ancestral domains. If a land is part of an ancestral domain and someone is claiming it as part of their ancestral domain, then the right of the owner, the registered owner, must be respected.
Lastly, Council, why did these IPs 25 years ago lay their claims over the affected areas? Why did they wait for this moment to come forward and tell us that is our ancestral domain, that is part of our land? Why not? Why didn't they impose their objections 25 years ago when all these tenurial instruments were still being applied for by the people's organizations and other corporations?
Attorney Pacoribot, your time is up. And now we will call on the first speaker of the negative side to oppose the proposition why it is necessary that a free and prior informed consent should be secured from the NCIP. Attorney Pacoribot, you have 7 minutes to deliver your constructive speech.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Again, to our distinguished panel of adjudicators, our worthy opponents, my colleagues in the negative side of the House. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This debate hinges upon the issue as to whether or not free, prior, and informed consent is necessary in the renewal or even in the issuance of tenurial instruments over forest lands governed by the DENR. However, in order not to confuse the honorable panel of adjudicators and judges, and the audience, of course, the arguments of the negative side of the House, we will instead rephrase the issue and focus more on answering whether or not the present laws, rules, regulations involving FPIC adversely affects the plans, programs, and duly sanctioned activities of the DENR over timberland areas meaning the affected areas we are now debating about throughout the country. As a negative side of the House, we are going to argue that the FPIC, under the present rules, adversely affects the programs of the DENR over the affected areas. For the following grounds: requiring FPIC in all issuances and renewal of tenurial instruments over the affected areas that are at the same time claimed by our brothers in the indigenous cultural communities or indigenous peoples impedes the powers, functions, and jurisdiction of the DENR over timberlands. Number two, some provisions in the rules governing the FPIC are incongruent with the Joint Administrative Order Number 1, Series of 2012, issued by the DENR, the Department of Agrarian Reform, the NCIP, and the Land Registration Authority, or LRA. Number three, FPIC may become an oppressive tool against interests of non-members of the IP community, including us, the majority. And number four, FPIC slows down growth over the affected areas, with all due respect. As first speaker, I shall discuss the first two grounds, but the rest of the grounds will be discussed by my colleagues. Now, true enough, the Indigenous Peoples' Right, or IPRA Act, or the IPRA Law, which was enacted in 1997, was designed primarily to protect the interests of our brother and indigenous cultural communities and indigenous peoples, especially those concerning their means of livelihood and sustenance. We, in the negative side, fully adheres to the wisdom of this noble legislation. Considered as marginalized, the IPs and the ICCs need the protective mantle of the IPRA Law to cultivate and perpetuate their time-honed traditions and ways of living. Embodied in the IPRA Law are several provisions that tend to restrict the usage and exploitation over the lands they are now claiming. Notable among those provisions is the requirement of the issuance of certificate precondition and the FPIC or free prior informed consent. A close inspection of the provision mandating the issuance of FPIC in a way impedes and obstructs the powers and functions of jurisdiction of the DENR in the affected areas. The requirements of FPIC limit the activities which can be lawfully done over timberland areas. Under present rules, all tenurial instruments like CBFMA and FLGLA, even after complying the long list of requirements provided by the DENR, will have to undergo again a maze-like process of securing the FPIC and CP from concerned ICC, IPs, and NCIP, which, by the way, and with all due respect, do not have expertise in land management. Under pertinent rules, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources shall be the primary government agency responsible for the conservation, management, protection, proper use, and sustainable development of the country's environment, natural resources. As provided in Section 4 of EO 192, creating the DENR, the DENR is mandated, among others, as mentioned earlier, to ensure the proper use of forest lands within the country. Now, among the powers and functions of the DENR, per Section 5 of EO 192, is to exercise supervision, control over forest lands, alienable, disposable lands, and mineral resources. This includes the lands now being claimed by our brothers in the IP community. The DENR, therefore, is the only agency that must have jurisdiction to grant any concession or lease over timberland areas, it being composed of personnel trained for that purpose. It must therefore be the only government agency that must prescribe the requirement before any activity may be made in the affected area. The requirements provided by the specific rules for a specific type of concession or lease over a timberland are designed to ensure the activity in the area conforms with environmental laws, rules, and regulations. With the passage of the IPRA Law and the issuance of rules pertaining to FPIC, a new and totally different requirement is now being injected. That is the issuance of FPIC. Despite the intricate rules of its issuance, FPIC is a different type of requirement that does not concern with land conservation and management, and therefore must not be equated with the rules provided by the DNR. Understandably, the FPIC is a mechanism to protect the interest rights of the IP inside the ancestral lands, such that the non-IP individuals and groups, including the DENR, are restricted from developing the land in any manner without the consent of the IP. While the intention of the IPRA law is noble, it appears that the requirement of FPIC has supplanted and even undermines all the powers and functions of the DNR over the affected areas. Because at the end of the day, after all the technical and financial requirements have been met, this one specific requirement of FPIC will determine whether or not a non-IP group or individual may be granted tenurial instruments in the affected area. FPIC is a requirement to protect the interests of the IPs. When the requirements laid down by the DNR, including...
Attorney Pacorebo, your time is up.
Okay, thank you. I'm ready for interpretation, Your Honors.
Thank you.
Attorney Villanueva, you have 4 minutes.
Yes.
To conduct your interpretation.
Your Honors, may I proceed? Mr. Speaker, would you agree with me that if a law has not yet been declared unconstitutional, then it remains valid and subsisting?
Yes, Counsel, absolutely.
Okay. And would you agree with me also that to this day, the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1997 has not yet been declared unconstitutional?
No, that's not, it is still valid and it has not yet been declared unconstitutional.
Thank you. Then therefore, you would also agree with me that sections 44, 46, and 59 are valid and must be complied with.
Yes, Counsel. However, the same provision or sections are now the subject of unnecessary and tedious process of debates among and between IPs and government agencies.
Yes, but you would also agree with me that in Cruz versus DNR Secretary, this law, the IPRA law of 1997, was questioned before the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court declared it to be constitutional.
I am not aware of the full text, Counsel. However, I understand that the IPRA law at the time of its passage or years after that was declared as valid. However, we must remember that these issues now we are debating come into life because those instruments issued 25 years ago, when they were still in 1997, they were still 6 or 7 years old. And now they are already 25 years old, right, to be for renewal. This is I think the high time or the right time for the Supreme Court to rule upon the issues discussed then.
Okay.
Because,
Now, would you agree with me also that it is basic that jurisprudence, when it is established, it would form part of the laws of the land?
Yes, it is. However,
And if it is not reversed by the Supreme Court, it will still remain valid.
It will be valid, and we hope cases later on will be filed.
And in Arinio versus Insular Government, the Supreme Court declared that ancestral lands are private lands, correct?
I am not totally aware of that, Counsel. Sorry.
Anyway, that is the gist of the jurisprudence. Now, therefore, if these lands, before they were declared ancestral domains, yes, you are correct that they are managed by the government and they were given to certain individuals as tribal instruments. However, when the ancestral domains were approved, then these ancestral domains were taken out from the jurisdiction of the DNR because these ancestral domains are now considered private lands as what Carino versus Insular Government.
But we beg to disagree with that, Counsel, because if there is a pending renewal, it goes to show that the land is still within the mass of public domain, and both the PO and the IP community are in totagwar as to who will manage the area. Meaning there is still no CACTI or CALSI over the area.
Yes, but there is a supervening event. When the ancestral domain was granted, that would only mean that a CACTI was already issued.
No, not necessarily, Counsel, because prior to the issuance of the CACTI or the CALSI, they will still go to the DNR and have their survey plans approved. But it will create stalemate because the DNR, feeling aggrieved, might not approve their survey plans. So what country or what country will there be without the Soviet lands? I mean, this is exactly the scenario we are trying to avoid.
But anyway, our position is that when it is already declared an ancestral domain, then therefore, the recipients of these ancestral domains already have a private title to this land by way of native title. Thank you, John.
We will proceed now to the second affirmative speaker, Attorney Araneta, who will deliver her constructive speech why it is beneficial that a free and prior informed consent should be secured from the National Commission on Indigenous People. Attorney Araneta, you have 7 minutes to deliver your constructive speech.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Your Honors, members of the Negative Bench, guests, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant morning. Now, as already pointed out by the first speaker of the affirmative bench, our position, Your Honors, is based in no less than the Constitution, the law, and jurisprudence. Meanwhile, the members of the negative bench, Your Honors, offer us a wrong solution to the underlying problem that they already mentioned. As we will be arguing later on, the solution is not to remove the need to secure the free and prior informed consent, or the FPIC, from the indigenous peoples or IPs, or the indigenous cultural communities, or the ICCs, but to in the renewal of the neural instruments over their ancestral lands, but to strengthen the FPIC process with the cooperation and participation of the said IPs or ICCs with the national government alongside with the local government units, non-government organization, and the local communities or the people's organization, which are the DENR proponents. To do otherwise would undo all progress made since the implementation of the IPRA law since 1997 and to go against the direction set by the Philippine Constitution. Your Honors, according to a study conducted by a German company in the Philippines, and through the climate-relevant modernization of the National Forest Policy and piloting of reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation measures project in the Philippines, it acknowledged that the Philippines has already a strong institutional and legal framework for safeguarding indigenous people's rights. In particular, the IPRA law is a landmark law for the recognition, protection, and promotion of the IP's rights. It includes the principle of FPIC, which recognizes the IP's rights to their lands and resources, and stipulates that an equal and respectful relationship based on the principle of consent shall be observed when third parties, companies, government, or individuals enter into these IP's lands. Indeed, Your Honor, the IPRA law was enacted not merely because it was the direction set by the Constitution, but because of its apparent benefits, which I am most respectfully going to point to all of you now. For clarity, my arguments would focus on 3 points. First will be the benefits to the ICCs or the IPs, the benefits to the proponents whose tenurial instruments are to be renewed, and of course, the benefits to the Department of Environment and Natural Resources or the DENR. You see, based on the data, as already mentioned by the first speaker of the United Nations Development Program, there are about 14 to 17 million indigenous peoples in the Philippines alone. And this alone, Your Honors, needs no further argument because it is very unconscionable and inhuman if we are to deny them the basic human right of self-determination to these 14 to 17 million indigenous people. They, as all of us, should be allowed to decide for themselves. In connection with this, the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, or NCIP for brevity, issued NCIP Administrative Order Number 3, Series of 2012, which provides for the guidelines on the exercise of free and prior informed consent. Accordingly, the FPIC actualizes and strengthens the exercise by ICCs or IPs of their rights to ancestral domains, social justice and human rights, self-governance and empowerment, and cultural integrity. The right of ICCs or IPs to the management, development, use, and utilization of their land and resources within their own ancestral domains is given utmost regard through the FPIC process. Ultimately, no concession, license, permit, or lease, production share agreement, or other undertakings affecting ancestral domains should be granted or renewed without going through the FPIC process. Your Honors, if we are to remove the need to secure their consent in the renewal of the neural instrument, it would not only result to human right contempt to the highest order, but would also leave the mandate of the Constitution as nothing but empty and shallow words. Excuse me. Now, let me discuss my second point. The benefits derived from the FPIC process to the proponents or the POs whose tenurial instrument over ancestral domains are to be renewed are ideally and clearly seen. Among these are partnership and friendship. The days of the might make right doctrine are long gone. We are now operating in a paradigm of friendship and partnership where everyone is looking for ways not to take advantage of each other but of looking for what Stephen Covey would describe, a win-win working relation. In sum, there is no reason to be enemies if we can be effective partners to one another.
Ms. Speaker,
Yes.
you mentioned about partnership or win-win situation in your argument,
Yes, Your Honor.
but people in general shy away from too much bureaucracy. Will requirement if APIC would add another layer to the already bureaucratic situation of this country, or will this not lead to the saying that too much scope, too many cooks will spoil the group? What's your comment on that?
Thank you, Your Honor. FPIC is not just a consent. FPIC, if we read the IPRA law, Your Honors, is a process. The FPIC process is it will convene the POs, the people's organizations whose tenurial instruments are to be renewed, and then they will be mediated upon by the NCIP and the DENR. They will be called upon to talk with each other and make negotiations with the IPs or ICCs within the area that are now considered as ancestral domain. And these areas are also given tenurial instruments to people's organizations who are not members of the IPs. So instead of looking at it as a bureaucracy, it will be a negotiation between the POs and the IPs. May I proceed, Your Honor? Your Honor, because Your Honor, thank you for the question. In the renewal of these instruments, we will be acknowledging the existence of these IPs within our areas because I am from Bukidnon and we have lots of conflicts between the IPs and ICCs and these proponents of the DENR.
Your time is up, Attorney Caraneta. Thank you very much. Now we have the second negative speaker to conduct his interpellation or cross-examination. You have 4 minutes.
Good morning, Honors. Good morning. My first question would be is that do you consider the area covered of the expired DENR issued tenor instruments fall under the jurisdiction of the NCIP?
They are privately owned. They are owned by the IPs and the ICCs.
Even without CADP or CALC?
They have CADPs, but also, if we follow Carino versus Insular Government, their long occupation and possession ripens to a private ownership over the lands. And even the application of CADCs and CADPs itself must because CAT is only merely confirmatory of their ownership.
Are you saying that those CADP and CALC are already confirmed?
These CADP or CALCs are confirmatory of their ownership, meaning they are already owners of the said ancestral lands. However, because these lands cannot be disposed of, cannot be sold, even for time until forever. So these CADPs will be the proof that they are the owners of this land, but they are themselves owners before the CADPs or CADCs were even issued to them, because the ownership is from time immemorial.
Lastly, assuming without conceding that the said area belong to the IPs and the ICs, are they sufficiently equipped with all the knowledge and technical and scientific skills to manage their lands.
That is why we have this FPIC process wherein we can talk with them and we can guide them on what to do with their lands.
Thank you, Speaker.
Ms. Speaker, I have additional question.
Yes, Your Honor.
You mentioned that the IPs or the ICCs have absolute ownership over the ancestral land.
Not absolute, Your Honor. Limited.
Private ownership, not public ownership, you said you earlier mentioned.
Yes, Your Honor.
However, in Section 57 of the IPRA law, it merely states that the ICC and IPs shall have priority rights in
Yes, sir.
harvesting, extraction,
Priority right.
development. It merely states of priority, but not absolute ownership. How do you reconcile that?
Your Honor, because in Taguigno versus insular government, it stated that this their long occupation from time immemorial and the possession over the lands is considered as their private ownership. And Your Honor, this private ownership is not absolute because the natural resources found therein, the minerals found within their lands, are still owned by the state, Your Honor, and cannot be sold. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. Now we will proceed to the next second negative speaker, Attorney Malawani, argue why it is not beneficial that NCIP free and prior consent should be secured. You have 7 minutes to deliver your constructive speech.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, fellow lawyers. Good morning, Your Honors. Your Honors, Ban Ki-moon once said, "Sustainable development is the pathway we want for all." It offers a framework to generate economic growth, achieve social justice, exercise environmental stewardship, and strengthen governance. Said words, ladies and gentlemen, represent the principle behind the grant for issuance of DENR digital instruments in favor of qualified individuals, such as public organizations, and including the IPs and the ICs. In summary, the issuance thereof is a strategic scheme by the government for the protection, rehabilitation, development, and utilization of forest lands and its resources. On one hand, such scheme allows the grantor, which is the DENR, to benefit from the grantee through the protection by the latter of the awarded or assigned area from illegal activities, such as illegal occupants, illegal loggers, and poachers. On the other hand, the grantor permits the grantee, which includes members, again, of the ICCs and IPs, to make use of the awarded or assigned area for a certain period and later on benefit from its utilization. Your Honors, having said the foregoing, we ask, does the insistence of requiring FPIC in the renewal of DENR issued tenurial instruments benefit the above-mentioned stakeholders? As our second proposition, we answered in the negative, Your Honors. To elaborate our second proposition, we argue in the following. First is that the FPIC only creates an additional burden, especially to the POs, without any legal effect to the renewal of the DENR tenurial instrument. Contrary to what the second speaker has mentioned, we, on the negative side, do not try to terminate the requirement of FPIC. Our argument is that since the areas covered under this tenurial instrument do not fall under the jurisdiction of the NCIP, then the FPIC is no longer required. In fact, laws governing DENR issued tenurial instrument do not require compliance of FPIC for renewal of the same. Take, for example, the case of Community-Based Forest Management Agreement, or CBFMA. The law merely requires, among others, a resolution from PO members authorizing the officers to file CBFMA renewals. The law mentions of no other requirement, such as FPIC compliance. Following the legal principle, what the law does not include it excludes. The POs need only comply the requirement mentioned to validly review a DENR issued tenure. Thus, compliance of the FPIC will be nothing more than just an additional burden, especially to the POs. A burden that does not even affect the validity of the renewal of the said instrument. My second argument is that the insistence of FPIC impedes the powers, functions, and jurisdiction of the DENR, and it is incongruent with the Joint Administrative Order Number 1 Series of 2012. Requiring the FPIC in all issuances and renewal of tenure instruments over timberlands that is, at the same time, claimed by the cultural communities or indigenous peoples impedes the powers, functions, and jurisdiction of the DENR over timberlands. As a result, the said requirement will prevent DENR from imposing, implementing, or continuing their technical and scientific expertise over the affected areas. Furthermore, imposing said requirement pursuant to NCIP, Administrative Order Number 3 Series of 2012, the revised guidelines on free and prior informed consent and related processes of 2012, runs counter with the Joint Administrative Order Number 1 Series of 2012, entitled Clarifying, Restating, Interfacing the Respective Jurisdiction, Policies, Programs, and Projects of the DAR, DENR, and LRA, and the NCIP in order to address jurisdictional, operational issues between and among the agencies. As a consequence thereof, there will be overlapping of powers, functions, jurisdictions between and among mentioned agencies. As my third argument, assuming arguendo that FPIC is indeed necessary, the laws requiring the same lays no clear procedure for the compliance thereof, which may result to exploitations of ICCs and IPs. In addition, it will require a significant amount of time and government resources as well. But the problem does not end there. After undergoing the rigid process and spending several hours and government resources, the next question would be, will the ICCs and IPs concerned be truly represented in the assemblies or dialogues for FCIP compliance, or will their voice even be heard? Or will they just fall prey to exploitation? We admit that requiring FPIC lays down guidelines, and the law requiring FPIC lays down the guidelines, procedure on how to go about the compliance of the same. Unfortunately, in the implementation of the said law, actual situations reveal the contrary. Several FCIP compliance cases in areas legitimately classified as ancestral lands or ancestral domains. In ancestral domains, there have been reports of situations of putting the car in front of the horse, discrimination of ICs and IPs, and the like.
Mr. Speaker,
Yes,
you
sir.
mentioned that you mentioned of administrative order joint between and among DENR, DAR, and NCIP. Can you cite? Are you saying therefore that FPIC is no longer required in that joint circular?
First, I am saying, Your Honor, that before the NCIP may impose FCIP, the area covered must fall under their jurisdiction. Now, the second speaker a while ago mentioned that the DENR, the areas covered by the DENR issued instruments are owned privately by the IPs and ICs, which we disagree. Because in order for the said areas, the areas covered by the DENR issued instruments to be validly classified as belonging to the jurisdiction of the NCIP, the NCIP must first Before they even draw a map, they must first consult all other agencies such as the DAR, DNR, and LRA, and have them issue a certificate of non-overlap, Your Honor. The purpose of this is in order the purpose of this is to avoid conflict of jurisdiction, Your Honor.
Attorney Araneta.
Did I get you right earlier that you mentioned that your intention is not to eliminate or terminate this FPIC?
Yes, Your Honor.
So in other words, you're not opposed to the arguments of the affirmative side?
Yes, Your Honor.
Attorney Araneta, you may have your debate. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mr. Speaker, do you know that the FPIC is not coming from the NCIP but from the IPs or the ICCs?
Yes. Yes, Counsel.
And do you also know that these IPs and ICCs are now in possession of those lands wherein the POs have funereal instruments over?
Not necessarily.
So, to let you know, Mr. Speaker, in Bukidnon that's the case. And without this, do you believe, would you agree with me that let us say as a practicing lawyers, that there are certain benefits that may be obtained in negotiations and in mediations?
Not necessarily.
In fact, it is even encouraged in court that we mediate and we negotiate, di ba? Right, Mr. Speaker?
Most probably.
In the same way, Mr. Speaker, that the FPIC is obtained through negotiations and partnerships and mediations with the POs or the proponents of the DNR, would you not agree that there are benefits that may be obtained through these mediations and partnerships and negotiations?
Can you repeat the question?
In the same way that the FPIC is obtained through negotiations, would you agree that there are benefits that may be obtained through these negotiations?
Yes, Counsel, but the cause of the widespread negative perception about the FPIC is the non-implementation of agreed or promised benefits.
I have no more questions, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Now we will proceed to the third affirmative speaker, Attorney Jumair Ampay, who will discuss the beneficiality of the proposition. The practicability of the proposition. Why is it practicable that an FPIC should be secured from the NCIP? Attorney Ampay, you have 7 minutes to deliver your constructive speech.
Your Honors, esteemed speakers from the negative bench, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, Assalamualaikum. It is an honor to speak in behalf of the affirmative side of this issue, which is very relevant today, especially for me, being a member of the Maranao tribe, indigenous people from the Lanawin Sur and Lanawin Norte. Throughout the course of this debate, we have proven and demonstrated that the FPIC is required in the renewal of the TDR instrument involving ancestral lands and domains. It has been stressed by our 7 speakers that the solutions provided by the opposing bench will only undo all the progress made by our government and will lead to the repetition of the incident of injustices committed or made against to our brothers, the IPs and the ICCs. Our submission, Your Honor, is not is that the solution should not to remove the AFPIC requirement, but to strengthen the coordination of the government agencies involved. And this can be made by harmonizing the various laws relating to the IPs, ICCs, and the FPIC. The goal, Your Honor, of requiring the FPIC is not to somehow diminish or reject the right of the state under the Regala Doctrine as mandated by the Constitution, but the aim of the FPIC requirement is to establish bottom-up participation and develop and consultation of the IPs prior to the beginning of the development on their ancestral domain, and also to protect the rights of the IPs and the ICCs over their ancestral lands and to stop the historical injustices experienced by the IPs and the ICCs. 2 points to support and defend the affirmative side's argument on the practicability of the requirements of FPIC in the renewal of the federal instrument involving ancestral lands and domains. First, it is the duty of the Philippines, the government itself, as a result of being the member of the United Nations. And second, it is the rights according to the IPs and the ICCs under the international law and the municipal law. Under the current international law, governments are obligated to consult the indigenous communities before any development affecting their lands and resources takes place, and even more broadly, any decisions directly affecting the IPs and their self-determination require their consultation and consent. The United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues requires that the IPs should be consulted in a way which is appropriate for their customs. The principle of the FPIC within international development is most clearly stated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous People. The Article 19 thereof states, and I quote, "States shall consult and cooperate in good faith with the IPs concerned through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their FPIC before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect them." The International Labour Organization also, on the other hand, made and stated in the ILO 169, specifically Article 6, Paragraph 1 thereof states, and I quote, that the government should consult the peoples concerned through the appropriate procedures, and in particular through the representative institutions whenever consideration is being given to legislative or administrative matters which may affect them directly. Your Honors, if we examine the mentioned international declaration and convention, the core reasons for the requirements of the FPIC is to protect the rights of the IPs and the ICCs. FPIC is standard protected by the international human rights law. It states that all people have the right to self-determination and all people have the right to freely pursue their economic, social, and cultural development. The FPIC is protected under the International Labour Organization 169 and the UN Declaration on the Rights of the Indigenous People. The Philippine Constitution also has explicit provisions for the protection of the indigenous people's rights. It guarantees IP's right to ancestral domains and lands. Specifically, Section 5, Article 12 of the Constitution, which provides, and I quote, "The state, subject to the provisions of this Constitution and national development policies and programs, shall protect the rights of the ICCs to their ancestral lands to ensure their economic, social, and cultural well-being." One of the steps made by the Philippine government. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, in your speech, you mentioned that allowing the ICCs to be able to give the necessary the grant in renewing tenurial instruments. This is for the protection of their rights.
Yes, Your Honor.
Can you go directly, the practicability on the part of, on the side of ICC, how will this be practicable in terms of protecting their rights?
Your Honors, if we remove, Your Honor, the requirements of the FPIC and reviewing the federal instrument affecting the ancestral lands and domains, Your Honor, their rights, which is accorded by the international law and the municipal law, Your Honor, to the IPs and the ICCs, Your Honor, will be violated, Your Honor. Your Honor, also in the also it was mentioned, Your Honor, in the declaration. It was also mentioned, Your Honor, that the IPs, Your Honor, or the ICCs, Your Honor, are the best conservers of the biodiversity, Your Honor. So I think, Your Honor, the rights, Your Honor, to in the ancestral lands and domains, Your Honor, should be respected by the government agencies, the POs, and the private corporations who are engaged in exploration of the ancestral lands and domains, Your Honor. The Philippine Constitution has expressed I mentioned that already. One of the steps made by the Philippine government in implementation of this constitutional provisions on the rights of the IPs, and recognition of the IPs' rights and interests over their ancestral domains is the enactment of the EPRA. The FPIC has clear statutory basis in the Philippine law and is one of the most prominent features of the EPRA. The FPIC is repeatedly mentioned in the EPRA for purposes of protecting the IPs' interests in their ancestral domains.
Your time is up, Attorney Ampay. Now,
Mr. Speaker, I have a question. You mentioned that the IPs are the best people, best defenders of the forestal land. How would you deal about the allegations that some IPs are engaged in slash and burn agriculture? These are commentaries circulating among the media. So how do you answer that allegation?
Your Honor, that issue, Your Honor, is merely isolated issue, Your Honor. There are more than, as mentioned by the second speakers, there are 14 to 17 millions of the indigenous peoples, Your Honor. That issue, Your Honor, is merely isolated, Your Honor. Not all the IPs, Your Honor, are engaged in that slash and burn issue, Your Honor.
Specifically, how would the IPs benefit from your proposition? In a specific instance.
Your Honor, one of the benefits, Your Honor, of the IPs, Your Honor, is the utilization of the natural resources, Your Honor, within the ancestral lands and domains, Your Honor.
Will their incomes increase or whatever?
Yes, Your Honor, there will be an income, Your Honor, income increase, Your Honor, not only, Your Honor, for the IPs, Your Honor, but also to the government itself, Your Honor, because, Your Honor, the requirements of the FPIC, Your Honor, is the bottom-up participation and consultation between the government, the IPs, the POs, and also the private companies who are engaged in exploitation of the natural resources, Your Honor.
Hello. As I understand, the focus of your argument is about practicability. Would you not consider it no longer practicable and in fact dilatory? Because we are talking here of renewal. Renewal of tenurial rights. In other words, when the first tenurial right was already issued, since there is already that law, you have, in other words, the IPs, the ICCs have already given their free and prior informed consent. And how is it practicable in relation to the country as a whole when we are going to repeat another process of giving this free and prior informed even on renewal that is bringing a lot of problem now?
Your Honor, the requirements of the FPIC, Your Honor, is not required only on the application for the renewal instrument, Your Honor, but also to the renewal of the FPIC, Your Honor.
Is it still practicable when you have already given your consent earlier in the first tenurial right that was issued? That is how I would like to see your argument.
Your Honor, 25 years ago, the IPs were not consulted as to the development introduced by the People's Organization to their ancestral lands. That is why the EPRA law mandates that the FPIC must be obtained before the renewal, Your Honor. That is the reason, Your Honor, why the EPRA includes the requirements of the FPIC before the renewal of the FPIC, Your Honor, because of the injustices made against the IPs, Your Honor, way back years ago, Your Honor.
Anyway, go
I
ahead.
have a question. You mentioned that the IPs were not consulted in the prior decades. Isn't it the fact that there was an agency tasked to the concerns of these cultural minorities prior to the NCIP? Isn't it the fact that their concerns or rights were also taken care of when they applied the first application of permits?
Yes, Your Honor, there is the government agencies who are tasked to implement and protect the rights of life, Your Honor. But there is no consultation, Your Honor, made by these peoples, by these POs.
Attorney Ampay, your time is up. Now,
Thank you.
we will proceed to the third negative speaker. Constructive speech, Attorney No more time. So third speaker, Attorney Gaspe, will deliver his constructive speech and oppose why it is not practicable to secure an EPIC from the inside. Attorney Gaspe, you have 7 minutes to deliver your constructive speech.
Distinguished guests, adjudicators, to my fellow speakers, hi and good morning. The question I want to ask you is why require the FPIC again, where in fact they have previously granted ignorant rights? Is it not an act of frivolous redundancy and futile laying of precondition? Is it? I say it is, and therefore it is beyond the mantle of what is practicable. Requiring the required free and prior consent, informed consent, would be superfluous and impractical, since what we are talking here is renewal. When we speak of renewal, it presupposes that the person applying for renewal has already been granted a previous and existing right. That would mean that the person applying has already complied the necessary requirements for its application, how much more for a renewal, which is a clear act of useless repetition of precondition. Hence, the question of practicability is quite availing and relevant. Your Honors, for information purposes, IPRA law is not a self-executing law. Rules and regulations and administrative orders are necessary to implement its provisions, which are like JAO number 1 series of 2012 and NCRP number 3 series of 2012, which are its implementing rules and regulations. Absence of such makes the question law irrelevant, and the question as to its authority and its requirement of FPIC is of no importance and should not be given weight. However, under Section 4 of Executive Order 192, it was mentioned there that the DENR is responsible for the conservation, management, development, and proper use of country's environmental resources, specifically forests and grazing lands, mineral resources, including those in the reservation of watershed area and land of public domain, which was also part of the coverage of the NCIP. Therefore, there is a question of encroachment of authorities. Hence, the IIR of the IPRA law is not settled to its authority, and it's overstepping, therefore, and violating the mandate that laws and IRR should be clear and should have its own boundaries. And that is not the case here because there is an overstepping of duties and function. Hence, therefore, it is just and proper to deprive the NCIP of its functions and in connection thereof, making the issue of this debate relevant. Your Honors, be that as it may, that the above-mentioned IPRA law and its implementing rules and regulations, or IRR, which requires FPIC for the renewal of tenurial rights. But it is not without admitting that the law is not susceptible of scrutiny, or shall we say the question of constitutionality. Yes, the law is presumed valid since there is yet any ruling decided by the highest magistrate. However, that does not mean that we cannot dissect it piece by piece to make a disputable conclusion of its validity and its violation of the so-called Regalia doctrine. As a matter of fact, in a certain case decided by the said magistrate entitled Cruz versus Clavier, no less than Justice Panganiban said that IPRA law recognizes or worse grants rights of ownership over lands of public domain, waters, and other natural resources which under Section 2 of Article 12 of the Constitution are owned by the state and shall not be alienated under the Regalia doctrine. That such sweeping statement places substantial portion of the Philippine territory outside the scope of the Philippine Constitution and beyond the collective reach of the Philippine people. And it also defeats, dilutes, and lessens the authority of the state to oversee the exploration, development, and utilization of natural resources, which the Constitution expressly requires to be under full control and supervision of the state. Here we can conclude that the said statement of our dear Justice Pangaliban is sensible and should be given weight, even though such statement was only a product of separate opinion. Since we can question the constitutionality of the April law and granting that it will be declared unconstitutional, it is of much importance that we should declare that such FPIC impractical. Your Honors, there is a clear violation of constitutional rights regarding respect of previously concluded contracts. Despite the passage of law making the said contracts in contradiction thereof. Other point to consider, Your Honors, since the April law was only made into law in the year 1997, and prior to that, there are already existing tenurial rights that has already been granted. Hence, these rights, just like other contracts enshrined in the 1987 Constitution and its civil code provisions, that existing contracts should not be affected with newly enacted laws and must be respected and be given effectivity even upon the passage of said law. In doing so, that grantees will be required to present or comply with the FPIC requirement would be a great contradiction to the previous declaration that applications that were previously granted are devoid of requirements, be it substantial or procedural, making the protection granted with no less than our beloved law of the land useless and of no worth. We also have to remember that contracts are presumed valid unless there are clear indicia that it is void ab initio or voidable in character. However, it is not what is happening here. Since these contracts has already been granted for so long a time, then what we should do is respect it as it is before, and it be impractical or repetitive rather, in character to revive the process all over again. Not to mention ignoring and violating certain rights, as I have mentioned a while ago, provided and enshrined in the Constitution and of the contract itself, thus subjecting the April law itself for scrutiny on its constitutionality. Hence, FPI's requirement is not practical and should not be given effectively.
In one sentence, what is your argument against practicability? Because you're reciting a lot of laws or whatever you narrated there. But against on the issue of practicability, what is your argument? In brief, against the argument.
I guess it is
Attorney Ampay, you have 3 minutes, 4 minutes to conduct your interpellation.
Mr. Speaker, my first question is that, would you agree that 25 years ago, no FPIC was required? Yes, okay. Was the consent of the owners of the ancestral domains obtained 25 years ago? Okay, next question. Do you agree that the circumstances 25 years ago have changed and are no longer exactly existing today? It is not. Okay. Does the expiration of the contracts makes the contract unenforceable? Does the expiration of the contracts, the tenurial instruments, makes the contract unenforceable? Okay. Do you know that 25 years ago, the IFPs have respected the contracts, and now you will still ignore the rights to give their consent? Okay, additional question, Speaker. Would you agree with me that there is a policy gap between the different government agencies? Would you agree with me that there is a policy gap between different government agencies? Gap. Policy gap. Yes, okay. In fact, this policy gap, lead already to conflicts. Yes. Would you agree with me that this gap is breached through the enactment of policies and the coordination, this unsettling coordination between the government agency to lessen the conflicts? Yes. And last now, as admitted by you, the problem is the lack of the policy. Is it not practicable solution to simply enact policies and not to remove the FPIC requirements in the renewal of the federal instruments? To strengthen the policies of the requirements of the would it be the best solution is to strengthen the policies of the requirements of the requirements of the FPIC, the renewal of the federal instruments, and not the removal of these requirements?
Yes, that is the suggested, but as to the business matters.
Okay, no more questions. Thank you.
And now we will proceed to the rebuttal. I will call first the team captain of the negative side, Attorney Pacory Montabilis, rebuttal within 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Now, after hearing the arguments coming from the negative side of the House, Your Honors, let me reiterate by illustrating, giving a scenario which gives rise to this present controversy. A people's organization with an existing and valid community-based forest management agreement for 25 years with the DENR, upon nearing the expiration of the said agreement, is now at the mercy and must go to the IP group with claim over the same area and begin the process of complying with the requirements for issuance of FPIC. Instead of being guaranteed the so-called respect of prior rights given under JAW number 1, this people's organization, which is a non-IP group, now stands subservient of the IP group in the area whose claim therein came much later. It must be remembered, Your Honors, that it is correct, as argued by the affirmative last speaker, that 25 years ago FPIC was not required. That is true. That is true. 1997 was the year when IPRA law was enacted. However, 25 years ago, what could have prevented these IPs to come forward and lay claim over these affected areas? None. They have not done so just because it is only now, or it is only for the past few years, and I don't know the reason behind this, that they have come to realize that perhaps that might be the land of my forefathers. Before, they did not do that. With or without IPRA law, these IP communities are not precluded from claiming these areas now as their own ancestral lands. If they could have done so 25 years ago, there could have been no conflict at present. Now that is our point in arguing for the necessity. Now as for the beneficiality, requiring FPIC in the renewal of tenurial instruments issued by the DENR only creates division between IP and non-IP groups. Remember, Your Honors, that these non-IP groups are also in the marginalized sectors. These people's organizations composing, applying for the tenurial instruments before the DENR are also in the poverty line in this country. Precisely, they are applying for tenurial instruments because they want to develop the lands for their, as a means of living and for sustenance. They are not totally different from our brothers in the IP community. Now, in the alternative, we propose that instead of secluding or creating a barrier between non-IP and IP groups, we instead incorporate these IP groups into the DENR programs, allocate more funds for them, and do away with the requirement of FPIC. I'm afraid.
Attorney Pacorebo, your time is up.
Thank you.
Now we will hear the rebuttal from the team captain of the affirmative side, Attorney Pacorebo.
Yes. Your Honors, in summation, we respectfully ask that you side with the affirmative bench in relation to the issue of land. As previously pointed out, our Constitution, the 1987 Constitution, specifically in sections 22 of Article 2 and Section 5 of Article 12, mandates that the state must recognize, promote, and protect the rights of indigenous cultural communities. This, the state did with the enactment of RA 8371, or the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act of 1987, through sections 44, 46, and 59, which requires the need for a free and quiet informed consent in matters which would affect the Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act in relation to their ancestral domains. The negative side has argued that the IPRA law has violated the Regalia Doctrine. May I remind the negative bench that this issue was already settled, and Chief Justice, or former Chief Justice Renato Puno, stated in his opinion that these ancestral lands are not part of the public domain. They are native titles, and they are privately owned, although they are limited kind of ownership because you cannot sell them. But they are, nonetheless, they are part of a native title. Hence, the state does not have jurisdiction over these areas. In addition, and in line with our international commitments relative to Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act, the Philippines voted for the adoption of the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous Peoples' Rights Act. Your Honors, we will point out three basic points. Why is there a need for the law to be, why is there a need for a free and informed prior consent? There is a need because the law provides for it. And why is it beneficial? It is beneficial because it will result into a partnership between the IPs and the members of the POs, which will result in a sustainable development. And why is it practicable? It is practicable because it will result into a costless, or it will result into a effective measure in relation to maintaining our forests. Why? Because we must admit that PNR cannot police and maintain the number of the thousands of acres or hectares of our forest lands. And by empowering these indigenous people to take care of our natural resources, then basically they will become environmental advocates. May I continue? Furthermore, in Carino versus Insular Government, the Supreme Court again recognized that ancestral lands are not again part of the public domain. They are privately owned by native title. Hence, logic dictates that before any person who would enter into an area, yes, sir. Thank you.
Your time is up, Attorney Benigno. Ladies and gentlemen, that winds up our debate. Let us give our lawyers a round of applause. And I am requesting the lawyers to cross the house and congratulate this. In order to give our adjudicators time to determine who is the best speaker and who is the best debating team, I will turn you over to our Master Officer.
Thank you, Attorney Flor. Before we announce the best speaker and the winning team, I have the honor to call in our Regional Executive Director of DNR Region 10 to give us his message with what just happened, or with regards to our debate competition. Let's all welcome him with another round of applause.